I'm here at hole number 10 at Old Hickory Golf Club in Livonia, New York. Now, number 10 is a 525-yard par 5. The dog leg's slightly right. What you want to do is you want to take your drive and you want to hit it on the right side of the fairway over that mound. And then if you take a decent fairway wood, then you have a wedge into a two-tiered green and you can two-putt for par. Of course, best laid plans of mice and men. What I usually do is slice it off into those trees on the right and then have to punch out. But anyways, chapter 7 is all about branding and branding strategy. Branding is so important in marketing because a brand is a product. Think about Nike, think about Disney, think about Apple and those brands. You know, people associate the products with the brand. We're also going to talk about positioning. And positioning is very important because that's how people view a product or a brand in the consumer's mind against like products in that space. So with that being said, let's get on with our lecture on branding and positioning. Wait a minute. Does anybody smell smoke? Oh man. As I said in the introduction, today's chapter is all about branding, positioning in the marketplace or marketing in today's economy. So let's start with a brand. A brand is a combination of all the things that a company has to offer. It's not just a company name. It's the symbols, it's the characters, it's the iconic things that represent the brand. For instance, if you take Nike, obviously Nike is the brand name, but that swoosh, which is basically a check mark, is iconic, and people recognize that check mark as being Nike without even saying Nike. That check mark represents Nike. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM Studios, the iconic lion roar at the beginning or at the end of movies is very iconic for that brand. Apple is the #1 brand in the world, and Apple's iconic symbol of the apple with a bite out of it is recognized worldwide. And then you also have, your iconic spokespeople, and those spokespeople can be human, like Flo with regards to Progressive Insurance, or that little lizard-like thing with the English accent. I'm not sure why the lizard has an English accent, but it does. I'm not sure if it's a he or she. Does. And that's iconic for Geico Insurance. So you have brand marks, brand symbols, you have trademarks, you have copyright. All of that is part of the iconic brands that we see today. So attributes of brands can be other brands because one brand is positioned against other brand. Look at the way Nike, and we're going to get into positioning in just a little bit, but look at the way Nike is positioned against, say, Under Armour, or Nike is positioned against Champion or something like that. Brands can be places. MGM, again, is associated with Hollywood and California. Brands can be things like iconic spokespeople, the lizard, or Flo, or something like that. Or brands can also be people. Forever, Michael Jordan was associated with Nike, and then Nike brought in other iconic spokespeople to associate with their brand, but most people still associate Nike with Michael Jordan because that's where it started way back in the 80s. So strategies used in branding. First of all, there's two different ways you can go about it. You can corporate brand, which means all of your products are under the same brand name. Campbell's Soup, for instance, you got bean with bacon, you got chicken noodle, and then you got your iconic tomato soup. Each one of those soups are under the Campbell's name. Coca-Cola is also a family brand where you have Diet Coke, Coca-Cola, you have caffeine-free Coke, and all those other things. Or you can have individual brands like Procter & Gamble, like Gillette has individual brands, like
Unilever, Dove is an individual brand under Unilever. It's not Unilever Dove, it's Dove brand. So they product brand versus the iconic company brand. IBM is a very iconic corporate brand, and their products go under the IBM name. Same thing with Nike. All of their products have that swoosh and that branding with it. And then some brands don't have any products associated with it. Like Target is a brand, but there is no Target brand. Walmart is a brand, but Walmart doesn't brand its own products. They use Great Value, for instance, to brand their own products. So generally speaking, brand starts with an individual products and then can either grow into a family brand like Coca-Cola, or it can stay with individual products like Procter & Gamble, IBM, and some of those others that I've mentioned. So the advantage of branding, number one, the first advantage, and I don't really see it here in this particular slide, but the first is distribution. Iconic brands, especially consumer brands, get distribution very, very quickly. Most shopping places or most retail stores will try something new from a brand because that brand carries so much power. It also provides assurance. For instance, you're driving down the road, and on one side of the road you see a Holiday Inn, on the other side you see Ron's Motel. Most people wouldn't go and stay at Ron's Motel. They would stay at a Holiday Inn over that because they're familiar with Holiday Inns and familiar with the brand. Even though Ron's Motel might be very nice, you never know. I don't know. I've never been to Ron's Motel, but it also provides consumers with comparison shopping. They are familiar with brands. They go back to brands, and it provides them also with shopping efficiency and risk reduction, as I said, with the two motels and that type of thing. So again, manufacturers' brands like Campbell's Soup, at reduced costs. They have one can. All they got to do is change the label. So they have manufacturing efficiencies. They have marketing efficiencies. They have product efficiencies. They have advertising efficiencies. And they have an enhanced inventory and lower risk. Private label brands, some people would call those store brands. Wegmans is the private label brand that we most associate with. They have less competition. You got to go back to the store to get that particular brand. For instance, my daughter, she loves Wegmans macaroni and cheese. She will not even eat Kraft macaroni and cheese. And I don't shop at Wegmans that much. I shop at Aldi's and other places, Trader Joe's. But I have to stop into Wegmans just to get macaroni and cheese because that's the only one she likes. And so that's the power of a store brand. It's exclusive, and they've got total control over their inventory. So it's the strategic branding decisions. You've got to ask yourself, are you going to individual brand? That's got greater risk, but it also has greater rewards. For instance, look at Procter & Gamble. One time, at one point in time when I was a wee lad, a good friend of mine was a product manager at Procter & Gamble, and she lived in Cincinnati. And she was a product manager for Tide. And she said her biggest competitor was Cheer, which was also a Procter & Gamble. So they actually fought for shelf space. So when you have multiple brands under one product, like Tide and Cheer and that type of thing, you get actually more shelf space because you don't have the family brand. You have individual brands, and stores will carry those individual brands. Sara Lee is one. I talked about Unilever. Dove and all things. Gillette is another one. And then, of course, you have, the family brands that we talked about. And family brands helps with product distribution and also helps with people trying different products within that brand because they're familiar with that brand. Co-branding or two more brands on the same product. Oftentimes you see that with Tostitos. Tostitos has a chips, and then you'll have a salsa, a different brand of salsa with the Tostitos chips. So they brand together. Co-branding also might be not necessarily edible products, but Microsoft does a lot of co-branding with Intel. After the Microsoft commercial, you see Intel inside, and that's an example of co-branding. Ben and Jerry's ice cream with M&Ms is another way of doing it. Hershey's co-brands with a lot of products. They put their Hershey's chocolate in a lot of different products. So they leverage each other's brand recognition. Doritos is now co-branding with Taco Bell. Although I never had Doritos at a Taco Bell, but I do like their soft tacos and their bean burritos. Whenever I go to Taco Bell, I get their soft tacos and bean burritos. They're actually awfully good, but that's a whole nother story. And then brand licensing is something that Nike does. For instance, Nike doesn't make the backpack. They co-brand the backpack. Disney does an enormous amount of brand licensing. They license the Disney characters, especially the storybook princesses like Cinderella, Snow White. Who's the fish? Ariel, the Little Mermaid. And they license those with a lot of different products out there, a lot of different backpacks, clothing wear, and that type of thing, where Disney doesn't make the clothing, but they license their brand for that clothing line in order to do that. Nike, Disney, lots of people will co-brand. Under Armour does the same thing. It's common in toys, it's common in clothing, and it's also common in sporting goods and sporting wear like backpacks and things like that. Brand value. Brand value is the value that the brand carries. Now, this got a little bit of confusion, but I want to let you know that a company has a different brand value. The most valuable brand out there, number one, would be Apple. Number two would be Google. That is just how much the brand is worth. The company itself is worth outstanding shares, number of outstanding shares times the price of the share. That's how much the company is worth, but they assign a value just to the brand. For instance, the brand value, and there's different ways of doing it. I talk about it very heavily in my strategy class in undergraduate. We don't have a lot of time here to do that, but let's say brand value for, say, Apple might be somewhere around $400 billion, whereas Apple as a company is worth over $1 trillion. So don't get confused that brand value is the value of the company. The company's value is number of shares outstanding times the price of the share. If you wanted to buy Apple, that's how you would buy it. But the brand value is a number that's always moving. It's very difficult to put a value on it, but that's how much the brand is. That brings us to brand loyalty, which is a positive attitude towards brand recognition, which is how people recognize products from the brand preference, we talked about that. For instance, I use this example all the time in undergraduate, but my mom only buys Jif peanut butter. She only buys Jif smooth peanut butter. And when the store's out of Jif, she'll say that the store's out of peanut butter. And I'll say, no, Mom, there's a lot of peanut butter there, but if they don't have Jif, she won't buy peanut butter because that's all she buys. She just loves Jif peanut butter. To me, it all tastes the same. You slap some jelly on it and, you got yourself a sandwich. But that's just me. Whereas brand preference, some people will not buy something if they don't have that particular brand. And then brand insistence, again, that's an example of my mom. She insists on Jif peanut butter or won't be buy it. So brand value is also known, and this is synonymous, and I use it synonymously, but brand value is also known as brand equity. So there you go. Apple is number one. Google is number two. Then you got Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, Coca-Cola. What always gets me about the top brands, the top 20 brands in the world, and that just proves the marketing prowess that the United States have. Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, Disney, McDonald's, AT&T, Intel, Nike, and Cisco. All of them are American brands. So that just shows you that even though we don't have a lot of manufacturing in the United States, we are powerhouses. The United States is a powerhouse in marketing because of the brand equity in some of these particular products. Packaging and labeling also comes into a brand. The iconic Kodak Yellow, the iconic Coca-Cola Red, the iconic IBM Blue. It improves functionality. It makes it more recognizable from a distance on a shelf. It also makes it protects the product. It also helps with product shelf life and things like that. So that concludes part 1, and I'll be back in just a minute with part 2.